Ever get the feeling that a country is just like bursting with potential?
Oh,
Like
no.
it has everything going for it, but something's holding it back.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's a sentiment you hear a lot about South Africa.
Definitely.
And in this deep dive, we're going to be looking at one very specific take on how to unleash that potential.
Right. We're zeroing in on the ideas of Rob Hersov,
Uh-huh.
South African businessman.
Right.
He's got this whole plan laid out, super detailed, and we've got excerpts from it, like spelling out exactly what he thinks needs to happen to change South Africa's economic course.
So, for our listeners who are all about getting to the heart of the matter quickly, our mission basically is to understand what Hersov is really saying.
Yeah.
Like, what are the key things he's recommending?
Uh-huh.
What does he think it'll take to hit that ambitious 5% economic growth he keeps talking about?
Right.
And what does he see as the more hopeful future for South Africa?
Yeah. And Hersov doesn't mince words when it comes to the current situation. His diagnosis is, well, pretty blunt.
Yeah, he basically says that South Africa has a ton of potential, but it's being strangled by bad governance and a government that he thinks is just too big and way too involved.
Right. It's not about tweaking things here and there.
He's not talking about small fixes, is he?
No, he's saying the whole economic structure needs a total rethink.
And that rethink, as far as Hersov's concerned, means a pretty radical shift.
Uh-huh.
He's talking about moving away from what he calls socialist approaches and embracing, well, libertarian capitalism, more economic freedom. That's a big difference in philosophy.
It is, yeah. And right at the core of his plan is this belief that free people, free markets, and free minds are all connected.
Okay.
This idea kind of shapes all his specific proposals.
Okay, so let's dig into that a bit.
Sure.
When he talks about this interconnectedness, what are the actual changes he thinks need to happen in South Africa's economy?
Well, this idea underpins everything for him. He's saying that by giving people more freedom, economic and otherwise, and letting markets do their thing with fewer rules, you'll naturally get more innovation, more investment, and ultimately economic growth.
Okay.
It's about the state taking a step back and letting individuals and businesses be the driving force.
Got it. So that brings us to the first pillar of his plan, strengthening property rights.
Right.
Seems pretty fundamental for any economy, really.
Definitely. And Hersov's got this analogy he uses. It's really clear.
Okay.
He compares weak property laws to building a house on sand.
Oh, I see.
No matter how well you build that house, it's always going to be at risk because the foundation's shaky.
Yeah, makes the consequences pretty clear.
Yeah.
So why does he think strong property rights are so important for South Africa's future?
Well, he says it's all about attracting investment.
Okay.
If people and businesses aren't sure they actually own things, they're not going to want to invest in them,
Makes sense.
develop them,
Right.
take risks.
Yeah.
It also impacts innovation because, well, think about it. If you're not sure you'll benefit from your ideas, why bother?
Right.
For him, it's all about building wealth, creating a stable economy.
Okay, solid base of property rights.
Uh-huh.
The next thing he focuses on is cutting down on bureaucracy.
Yeah,
I think anyone who's ever dealt with like permits or regulations can relate to that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
He really emphasizes how all this red tape, all these regulations, they just weigh down small and medium businesses.
Right.
And those are crucial for a dynamic economy, but he thinks they're being stifled.
So his goal is to make it easier to start and run a business, streamline things.
Exactly.
What kind of impact does he think that'll have?
Well, he believes that by cutting through the red tape, entrepreneurs will be free to focus on what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Their business, innovating, creating jobs.
Okay.
It just lowers the barrier to entry, encourages more competition, a more vibrant economy.
Less bureaucracy, more focus on business.
Yeah.
Got it. Now, this one always sparks debate. Privatization of state-owned enterprises, SOEs.
Yeah.
He specifically mentions some big ones: Eskom, Transnet, SAA.
Right. These are major players in the South African economy, and Hersov's pretty clear about what he thinks needs to happen.
Yeah.
He wants them fully and transparently privatized, the ones that are commercially viable anyway.
So what's the thinking behind that? Why push for privatization?
He basically says the government shouldn't be running businesses.
Okay.
Their role is to create a good environment for businesses to thrive, not to be in the business themselves.
Uh-huh.
He thinks state-run SOEs are often inefficient, prone to corruption.
So in his view, what are the benefits of privatizing?
He sees a few key improvements.
Mm,
Better service delivery because private companies have to be efficient. They have to keep customers happy.
right.
Less corruption because there's less political influence.
Okay.
And overall, just a more productive and efficient economy.
Yeah,
But, for listeners, it's worth remembering that privatization can be tricky.
right.
How it's done, the regulations around it, those matter a lot.
Good point. Moving on to labor market reforms.
Okay.
He says stiff job rules are holding things back.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
He's talking about labor regulations that make it hard and expensive for businesses to hire people, especially smaller businesses and young people just starting out.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks these rigid rules actually contribute to unemployment.
So what's his solution? What kind of reforms is he suggesting?
He thinks minimum wage laws need a rethink.
Okay.
Maybe they're set too high and discouraging job creation.
Right.
He also wants more flexibility in hiring and firing,
Okay.
so businesses can adapt more easily.
Got it.
And he's a big fan of voluntary contracts, which could mean more tailored agreements between employers and employees.
So basically a more adaptable labor market.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk taxes.
Uh-huh.
Hersov seems to think high taxes are a problem for the economy.
He does. He sees them as a disincentive to work hard, to invest, to start businesses.
Yeah.
His thinking is, if a big chunk of your earnings goes to taxes, it kind of dampens the whole economy.
Okay.
Makes people less motivated.
So what's his answer? What does he want to do about taxes?
Lower them, simplify them.
Okay.
The idea is to create an environment where people and businesses are excited to work, to invest, to take risks.
Uh-huh.
And he thinks this could actually lead to a bigger economy overall, generating enough revenue for essential services, even with lower rates.
Interesting.
It's a classic supply-side argument.
Right, the idea that lower rates can actually lead to more activity and more revenue in the end.
Exactly.
Now, he's also got strong opinions on international trade, and he's not a fan of protectionism.
No, not at all. He straight up calls trade walls economic self-sabotage.
Wow.
He's all about free trade.
And what does he see as the benefits of that?
Well, a few things. Free trade usually means lower prices for consumers because there's more competition, more choice.
Okay.
It forces domestic industries to step up their game, be more efficient,
Right.
and it opens up international markets for South African businesses. They can grow through exports.
So, embracing the global market.
Yep.
Another important pillar he mentions is an independent reserve bank.
Uh-huh.
Why is that so crucial in his view?
He sees an independent central bank, one that's free from political pressure, as absolutely vital for keeping prices stable.
Okay.
When the Reserve Bank can make decisions based on what's good for the economy, not what politicians want, it can control inflation better.
Right.
And that stability is key for long-term growth and investment.
So how does a stable price environment contribute to growth?
Well, it makes things more predictable.
Right.
Businesses are more likely to invest and expand if they know inflation won't eat away at their profits,
Mm-hmm.
and it protects people's savings.
Oh, okay. So it creates a sense of economic certainty.
Exactly.
Now, this is a big one for any economy, fighting corruption and strengthening the rule of law. Hersov doesn't shy away from this either.
No, he calls fraud an illness in the economy.
Strong words.
Yeah, he knows corruption destroys trust and wastes resources that could be used for good.
And why does he think a strong rule of law is so important for economic progress?
Because clear rules, consistently applied, and a system where people are held accountable are fundamental for attracting investment, both from inside and outside the country.
Right.
When investors know their rights are protected and the legal system is fair and predictable, they're more willing to put their money in.
Absolutely. Looking ahead, he also talks about education reform.
Yeah.
What kind of changes does he want to see in that area?
He's got some pretty big ideas.
Okay.
Like introducing charter schools and vouchers to create more competition and choice within the education system.
Okay.
And he stresses the importance of skills-based training that actually matches what businesses need.
So the goal is to improve the quality of education and make sure people have the skills that businesses are looking for.
That's it. He wants to build a workforce that's ready for a modern, growing economy,
Right.
prepared for the challenges and the opportunities.
Finally, he touches on reducing the size and scope of government. This kind of goes back to his point about government being too big and too involved.
It does. He sees a huge, slow-moving government as a roadblock to progress.
Okay.
He thinks it can stifle innovation, lead to wasted resources, and even crowd out private businesses.
So what does he see as the benefits of a smaller government?
More freedom for individuals, more entrepreneurship.
Okay.
When the government does less, People and businesses have more space to make their own choices, pursue opportunities,
Uh-huh.
and he believes it leads to a more efficient economy overall.
Okay, so those are the main points of Rob Hersov's plan.
Right.
He calls it a 10-step strategy, a practical roadmap to reach that 5% growth target.
Uh-huh.
Sounds pretty ambitious.
It is, but he presents it as a coherent plan, a set of reforms that all work together.
Right.
He's not just throwing out ideas, he's laying out a path to change,
Yeah.
and he's very clear about what he thinks has been holding South Africa back.
Yeah, and he's pretty direct about who he thinks is to blame, specifically mentioning the need to move away from what he calls the failed ANC policies of the past.
He doesn't hold back in his assessment of the current political and economic situation. He believes a real change in direction is needed to unlock South Africa's potential.
So what's the takeaway message? What's his call to action?
Well, his overall message is one of hope and optimism.
Okay.
He believes South Africa can achieve greater freedom, huge economic growth, a brighter future, but it'll take bold action, commitment to these free market principles.
And he ends on a pretty powerful note.
He does.
Yeah.
He urges South Africans to choose a path of freedom and unlock the true potential of the nation.
Uh-huh.
And he emphasizes the urgency, the time for change is now.
Right.
And his core belief, South Africa first. It's a clear and passionate call for a new way forward.
So just to sum up Hersov's vision for our listeners, it all comes down to empowering individuals and the free market. Stronger property rights, less bureaucracy, privatization of SOEs, labor market reforms, lower taxes, free trade, an independent central bank, tackling corruption, reforming education, and ultimately a smaller, more focused government.
Right.
It's a big plan, rooted in the ideas of economic freedom and individual liberty. And it's worth thinking about how all these different proposals would interact in practice, the potential benefits and the challenges of implementing such a wide-ranging set of reforms.
It's a massive undertaking. And as you can hear, Hersov believes these changes would completely transform South Africa's economic landscape.
Yeah.
It raises a fundamental question about the balance between state and private sector, and how to create prosperity in a complex developing economy like South Africa's.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our final thought for you to consider. What do you think is the most important change needed to unlock economic potential in any country? Is it all about freeing up markets, as Hersov argues, or are there other crucial factors at play? How do different economic and political philosophies approach this complex challenge?
It's a big question, with no easy answers and a lot of different perspectives. We hope this deep dive into Rob Hersov's proposals has given you a good understanding of one influential viewpoint and maybe sparked some of your own thinking on this important topic.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.